Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu-alaikum. Ji ayanu, pakhair-agale, ni hao, chunashumme, washmale. Ohio Gonzaimas, Guten Morgen, Hola, Bonjour, Privyet, Kaifahal, Hale Shoma Chatore, Ahlan Masal, Marhaba, Buna, Mucho, Gracias, Swabi, Abhalli Kariaya, Hosh Galdin, Anayo Sayo, Huya Mora, Chi Vatao, Chi Hal, Yud Kali Mera, and thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into PTV World. You're certainly watching World this morning, alongside my wonderful colleague who happens to be Miss Hira Mustafa, and I happen to be Shahzad Hassan Khan, and we hope and pray that everybody out there is doing wonderfully well and that you're ready to kickstart your day with us. But first things first, hello Hira, Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing today?
Walaikum assalam and good morning to all the viewers of World this morning. I'm doing really well, Shahzad,
Wow.
and keeping in view your fantastic energy, I'm looking forward to the remaining segments of the show today. And yes, so we're celebrating.
Yeah, before we actually
Yes.
move on to that, I actually just wanted to discuss this with all our wonderful viewers in 46 different countries, and that is that, so I believe that, there is a biological, I believe that, it's a fact. So there is a biological clock inside me.
Right.
And imagine that for the last 10 years, alhamdulillah, for the last decade, I've been doing this morning show transmission.
Of course.
And no matter what happens, whether it is a Saturday or a Sunday, my clock would always wake me up at 7:30. And at times, I'm not very happy about it.
Yes.
So imagine just last night, just because of the fact that my cousin was celebrating and he was listening to this music and whatnot. And I was like, hey, you know what? I certainly really need to sleep. But obviously, he was enjoying life.
Right.
He was having fun.
He was in the rhythm and the mood.
Yeah, and I couldn't just say anything because he's my elder brother as well. He's visiting from UK.
Right.
And then in my heart, I was like, yaar, bhaijan, kab neend aayegi inko. But, having said, so imagine what happened. I slept at 2. And my biological clock woke me up at 7:30 in the morning, and I wasn't
Wow.
happy about it. And I was like, okay, since my eyes are open now, I should really get ready. And once I got ready, I thought, I should have slept for another 1 hour.
Okay,
So
so
I
same-
couldn't really do that.
So somehow it happened same with me, Shahzad. I was struggling to wake up at 7 because it's not my routine.
Yeah.
But then again, I have to be at work. And keeping in mind the crazy rush hour we face while we're traveling from 7 to 9. So that's why we have to leave early, right?
Or do you live inside Islamabad?
Yeah, I do live inside Islamabad, but
that shouldn't be a
highways
problem.
highways always, jam-packed.
Yeah, there are alternative routes too as well, Hira. I'll tell you after the program. But for
Right.
everybody who's out there, ladies and gentlemen, if you're falling short on time, please make sure that you wake up before time so that you do not have to rush, so that you do not have to honk. And yes, people who honk early in the morning while you're in the rush hour, please don't do that. Nobody wants to listen to these horns of your cars, right? And that too at the beginning of the day. Please make sure that please do not honk, do not honk, do not honk. Because in the Western world, people think as if somebody's honking at them, they think that somebody's abusing. So please make sure that you don't abuse people early in the morning. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on towards the top stories. First up, Hira, what do we have?
Okay, so Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari is very much active when we talk about the international forums. So he has underscored the need for establishing a monitoring mechanism for crimes committed against women and girls in territories under foreign occupation, including Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And indeed, addressing a high-level debate in the UN Security Council in New York, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari stated that very object of violence in the situation of foreign occupation was to suppress a civilian population which is manifested most vividly in the occupied Palestinian territories and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Wow.
And indeed, Pakistan is actually underscoring this, you can say, highlighting this important agenda
yes.
at different international forums. And we definitely want, people living in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to, express their freedom
exactly.
of
And
speech.
Hira, in addition to that, I believe that, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab as our foreign minister is doing a wonderful job, and, more power to you, sir. Make sure that you bring back a good name to Pakistan, and the way you spoke against Modi,
Right.
I think that it was rightfully appreciated by the people all over the globe as well. But now moving on, because ladies and gentlemen, now finally Hira actually happens to be doing a podcast on
Yeah.
Pakistan Super League as well, and I'm on PTV Sports. So, we had this wonderful conversation about the match
Yes.
which took place yesterday. One of the most high scoring matches which was being chased by Quetta Gladiators as well. We thought
What was very
that Babar
shocking-
Azam was playing wonderfully well
Yeah.
until Roy came in. So imagine
Exactly.
the Quetta Gladiators batter Jason Roy. Hira smashed the highest individual score of the Pakistan Super League as he took Peshawar Zalmis to the cleanest Roy scored an unbeaten 145 runs to take
Wow.
his side to an 8-wicket victory over Zalmi. Batting first, Peshawar Zalmi got off a flying start as Babar Azam looked aggressive and hit 4 boundaries in first 2 overs. Saim Ayub also showed his aggressive intent and assisted the skipper very well as they added 67 runs in 6 overs of batting power play. And it looked like as if Peshawar Zalmi is going to literally win this match just after watching the power play. Both of them completed their half centuries and also scored second consecutive century partnership as they added 110 runs in 10 overs. They had a partnership of 161 runs of just 80 balls, which ended when Dwayne Pretorius dismissed Saim Ayub for 74 runs. Babar Azam completed his first PSS century in the 18th over with a 4 and he struck 2 sixes and 14 fours as he scored 100 of 60 balls. In reply, Martin Guptill and Jason Roy also gave Quetta Gladiators a flying start as they scored 15 runs in the first over and 12 runs in the second over. PSL's highest wicket taker, Peshawar Zalmi former captain Wahab Riaz, came himself to bowl next, but he was also hit for 3 boundaries of first 4 balls. Wow.
That's quite surprising.
And he
for
happens
me.
to be the sports minister for Punjab government as well. So I don't know whether how he might feel as an athlete himself, because first he got hit by 6 sixes by
Right, yeah.
Iftikhar as well. And now this, so Wahab Riaz Sahab, I think there's always time to kind of say bye to whatever you're doing when you know that you're not fit to do that. Probably as sports minister, you can do wonderfully well than as a bowler you're doing for Peshawar Zalmi. I'm sorry for this statement, but that's true.
But amazingly, I was surprised when it comes to Quetta Gladiators because it was seeming like they're unable to chase that massive 241 runs target, Shahzad. But to my surprise, they were doing really well.
They did well, and which is why they obviously took Peshawar Zalmi to the cleaners as well. And for today, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that if you really want an insight on what's going to happen today on the HBL PSL 8th edition, please make sure that you tune in to PTV Sports, and that too exactly at 4 p.m. I'll see you over there. But now coming down to where Hira actually started with this conversation, that today happens to be a very important day. So Hira, go ahead. Why don't you take the lead?
Yeah, so today we're celebrating, ladies and gentlemen, World Kidney Day, and which is very important to raise the awareness about this crucial disease that is prevalent in different parts of the country. And for that, we have been joined by wonderful doctors here in the studios, which I would like Shahzad to
Sure,
introduce.
why not? And just in addition to that, I would actually want to kind of share this statistic with the rest of the world as well, because you go out in 46 different countries. So it does not really matter whether you are in Pakistan or elsewhere,
Right.
ladies and gentlemen. 1 out of 10 people will certainly, unfortunately, have a disease which is going to affect their kidney. And for that, we certainly really need to raise more awareness. And while we speak of it, the theme this year around is kidney health for all. And we really need to kind of make sure that we spread that awareness which is being required when we speak about significance of this day, importance of this day, you know, the impact on health of the people who actually suffer from diabetes, hypertension, how come hearing loss is actually in connection with the kidney as well. I think with all of these questions, we would like to introduce our wonderful worthy guests who happen to be over here. Both of them happen to be professors, but obviously they certainly didn't wanted us to kind of go beyond that. So ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that we've been joined by somebody who happens to be a consultant nephrologist. He is Professor Dr. K.H. Mujtaba Qadri. Hello, sir. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. How are you?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Wonderful to have you over here. Not just that, ladies and gentlemen, alongside Professor Dr. K.H. Mujtaba Qadri Saab, we're very lucky that we've been joined by Professor Dr. Zahid Nabi Saab as well, who happens to be from Head of Nephrology, KRL. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Good morning. How are you?
Islam. Thank you very much for
And
the
while we
invitation.
speak about it, obviously Mujtaba Qadri Saab is going to represent Maroof Hospital over here. We're very Maroof Hospital and KRL Hospital has been really kind to let their doctors go on that too on such an important day. But sir, your role over here is to make sure that you spread that awareness which we have been talking about. First things first, how would you want to highlight the importance or significance of this day, where today we come together and, you know, while we speak about this day, it's the International Society of Nephrology and International Federation of Kidney Foundation who collaborates to make sure that we observe this day. So please, let's get started.
So thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The World Kidney Day obviously highlights several issues that are related to predominantly the patient community. And I think it's important to serve as their advocates. And since about 2 decades, this day has been celebrated. But this year, the theme in particular, every year there's a different theme. So this year, the theme in particular is about living well with kidney disease, taking care of the vulnerable, and also preparing for the unexpected.
Exactly.
And if you talk about the unexpected, COVID-19, there was nothing more unexpected than that in the last century.
Right.
And so, again, COVID just simply highlighted the inadequacies and the disparities in our healthcare delivery system, where people who obviously were dependent on certain systems suffered a little more than others who were more privileged during these times. So what's important to highlight is that kidney disease does not spare presidents or paupers. They affect everyone equally.
Right.
And one needs to have a system where this group of patients who are, they feel they are vulnerable, they feel they're economically challenged, families are economically challenged, transplants are expensive, dialysis is expensive, medications are expensive for taking care of chronic kidney disease. So we really need to have some kind of a system within the country which supports them and subsidizes the care of the
And we'll definitely talk about it towards the end of this segment, but let me very quickly move on to Dr. Zahid Saab over here as well. Now, Dr. Saab, this is something which I was discussing earlier with Qadri Saab as well, and that is that imagine, so Allah has given us life worth 80 long years, right? So obviously all the organs which have been designed within a human body really need to stay with us till 80 years or 70 years, or Allah knows for how long we're going to live. Why do you think that, that the kidney is being impacted because of our lifestyles? Or do you think that the choices we make, or what we eat, or what we breathe? So please let's talk about it.
Yeah, I think, because the basic function of the kidney, we should know what is the basic function of the kidney. The kidney is responsible basically to clear the waste products from our body. That is one. The other thing is the control of blood pressure. Every second, third person is hypertensive. That is also, the kidney is mainly involved in that. And at the same time, your question, what you said is that how we can make ourselves fit and make sure that our kidneys should work properly.
True.
The most important thing is that you should know that if you are vulnerable, you are at risk for kidney disease or no. That is very important. Like if you are hypertensive, if you are diabetic, if you have a family history of kidney disease, you are obese, you are smoker. So this means you are prone to kidney disease, you are at risk for kidney disease. So the old saying that prevention is better than cure, then you have to take care of yourself.
True.
By taking care of yourself, what I mean is that obviously you have to keep fit, regular exercise, no smoking, and weight. Obesity is a very, very important risk factor for kidney disease. Not for kidney disease, the metabolic syndrome, diabetes, hypertension, everything is related to obesity.
True.
So you have to take care of your weight very well. You have to control your blood pressure. If you are diabetic, you have to meticulously control your diabetes. And these are the risk factors which you can modify.
Exactly. And in addition to that, Dr. Saab, I would want you to kind of explain that how do we kind of burden our kidneys that we reach to a point where unfortunately we're involved in a chronic illness, that too which relates to kidneys as well. Do you think that it's the protein intake, because we go to the gym, we take protein powders, we eat mutton, beef, that's what we love over in Pakistan. There's so many dishes. We especially travel to Peshawar to have that namkeen kadai,
Yeah, obviously, the food habits, the intake of protein, excessive protein like these energy drinks and these protein powders, they do harm the kidney. They do harm the kidney, no doubt about it. But the main thing is that if you have an underlying kidney disease, then this harm will be multiplied.
Okay.
So if you have a definitive kidney disease, then there is a definitive renal diet which you have to comply with, so that there should be no extra burden on your kidney.
Okay.
But just if you are eating well, and like you are eating well and you are fit enough, then there is nothing wrong in taking this namkeen kadai.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It feels so wonderful, and for everybody who's out there as well. But moving back to Qadri Saab over here, I think, you have a question you wanted to ask.
Yeah. So, sir, stone disease is a common cause of, you can say, chronic kidney disease. How can it be prevented? And also, I want to know about the initial symptoms of the disease.
Okay, so I think it's important to understand what makes a stone.
Yeah.
So in general, that if something, any fluid like urine, if it gets super saturated with certain solutes, and there's a certain medium with low fluid in there, like the density or the concentration of those solutes is too much, and the fluid intake is less, or if you have certain inhibitors of crystallization, or there's a certain pH change in the urine, then certain kind of stones will precipitate in the kidney.
Right.
So there's a lot of predilection for people within families. So there may be a family history. the stone belt in Pakistan, Sindh, Multan, southern Punjab in particular. So I think that is important to understand that there is a family tendency.
Right.
There could be, obviously the diet contributes to it. So people who have a tendency for stones, who take a high salt diet, so what happens is that, the salt gets reabsorbed and calcium gets dumped in the urine.
Right.
So people then who have a high oxalate intake, things like tomatoes or palak, things like that. So obviously they would be a little more susceptible, especially with a high protein intake burden. Again, things which are rich in phosphorus would contribute to that.
Right.
But the essential thing is, if you can keep the urine volume high, like by having 2.5 to 3 liters of fluid and having around 2 liters or a little less of urine output,
Right.
then in general that supersaturated state is inhibited. But
Okay.
some people are born with certain inhibitors of crystallization,
Right.
which are absent or deficient. We find in our practices, I think Zahid would bear me out, hypocitrate urea,
Yeah,
less
it's very
citrate
common.
in the urine is so common,
So common.
that I almost feel that maybe our normals are different.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
even
right.
sure if that's a pathogen
Right.
in Pakistan. But those are the kind of factors. So people need to understand that if you have a family tendency, volume, high fluid intake would be at least the one single thing, if one had to name, that is important to
Exactly.
Right.
implement
And
this.
if you allow me, sir, I think the most important thing which I have felt in my practice, and sir as well, probably if someone has stone, they are going to a urologist, which is a kidney surgeon. They are managing the stones, either doing surgeries or whatsoever.
Right.
But what sir has mentioned is very important, that you have to find out the cause of those stones.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is genetic tendency, yes. Sometimes there is hormonal imbalance. There is one hormone, parathyroid hormone, that is sky high, and that is forming
Sorry,
stone.
I'm cutting you, sir. Do you think that our food intake, the kind of lifestyle we are living in, that also leads to the development of kidney stones?
Yeah, as Dr. Kadri mentioned, so if you're not taking enough fluids and your food is rich in tomatoes and oxalate and all those stuff,
Palak.
yes, yeah.
Right. Okay.
But what I want to emphasize is that what I have observed, patients have they are recurrent stone former, but no one is paying attention why these stones are formed.
Right.
Like simple thing, citrate in the urine. People have low citrate in the urine, that can be easily managed, and so that the stone formation can be stopped.
True.
So I think for everyone who has a kidney stone, apart from seeking advice from a surgeon that to get rid of that stone, that's fine if they're causing mechanical obstruction, but they have to work them up why they are forming these stones. That
Right.
is very important.
Exactly. And sir, since you've touched upon this as well, so for more further awareness for our audiences out there as well, let's just kind of define about or talk about a urologist and the difference in between nephrologist as well, because because we're talking on a World Kidney Day as well, so let's kind of have that explanation as well.
That is very important question. The urologist is simply a surgeon who is dealing with the kidney issues.
यानी मरीज
The
जाएगा तो
surgic-
कहेगा बस आपको ऑपरेशन ही होना अंदर है.
I mean, stones and all the surgical procedures regarding kidneys and urogenital system is being done by the urologist, and nephrologist is a physician of the
Physician,
kidney.
okay.
So there is distinction. There are many diseases which are overlapped. Obviously, you need a urologist and a nephrologist, but there are few diseases which
True.
is the domain
So
of a
who do you
nephrologist.
think can figure out the root cause wonderfully well? Is it the nephrologist or the urologist?
Obviously, the nephrologist.
Obviously the nephrologist. All right. So, and that should always be the first place to go to, God forbid, if you have any issue and if you know that, God forbid, it's your kidney which is hurting. Ladies and gentlemen, the first person you really need to go to is a nephrologist, and then they will tell you, God forbid, if you need a urologist or not. Am I correct?
I think it's better.
It's better,
because what I feel that there are so many complex diseases. A nephrologist is a better oversight than a surgeon. The surgeons, they are more mechanical,
I think that's wonderful. Moving back to Qazi Sahab over here. Now, Qazi Sahab, when we speak about chronic kidney diseases or illnesses, God forbid, what are the most common? So we've spoken about Pathri. What are the other diseases or illnesses?
So I mean, like worldwide, it's diabetes. I think that's the biggest scourge of our current time. So in terms of non-communicable disease burden, as diabetes goes up, so 50% of your type 1 diabetics and about 25 to 30% of type 2 diabetics are eventually going to have some form of kidney disease involvement. So diabetes is a major one, but besides that, what is unfortunate in Pakistan is this category of chronic glomerulonephritis. So these are chronic glomerulonephritis. Even I have a difficulty saying that. But the important thing to highlight that is that a lot of kidney diseases which are treatable are missed in our primary care system and in our general practices,
Okay.
because early detection of kidney disease which is so important in terms of detection of protein in the urine beyond a certain limit, or blood in the urine, and early symptoms of kidney disease, like not being able to concentrate urine and having a lot of urine in the middle of the night.
True.
Those kind of things are subtle things which get missed, but those are the things that are important to pick up at the primary care level. So anybody who's taking care of diabetes or high blood pressure needs to be doing urine analysis routinely, taking care of the creatinine. Even creatinines in Pakistan are very misleading in the lab ranges that we see.
True.
A lot of people are saying that up to 1.4 is normal. I'm sorry, that's very, very high for a lot of people. Maybe for a person who's got a big muscular mass like yourself, 1.3 might be, mashallah, normal. Yet, if somebody is, maybe 50, 60 years old and half your size and maybe female gender, that 1.2, 1.3 is like, having stage 3 chronic kidney disease, less than 50% kidney function. So it's important to understand these particular things.
And sir, since you happen to be the chairman for the research task force in the Pakistan Society of Nephrology as well, so how do you think that you're going to cater this menace? Because I've come across this situation quite a lot of times where the scales have been, probably, the FDA or, it's the pharmaceutical companies, they will take them up, bring them down. They play accordingly. So, earlier, because, my father always keeps a check on his diabetes as well. So, he was telling me the other day that they have brought down the scale for the diabetes when they, so earlier the figure might have been different. I'm not sure about the scale itself. And then he was like that, okay, now it came down, and then now the current one actually shows that he's diabetic. So he's like, okay, I think it's the pharmaceutical companies which are playing with us. So can you please speak about
because
it?
Because I'll start with your last question first.
Yeah.
The last point. So, yeah, I mean, like when we're talking about hypertension, there's, the World Hypertension League, and then there's a Joint National Committee, Session 8, which worldwide tries to harmonize the definitions for hypertension. So every year the figure comes down lower and lower and lower. Similarly, for diabetes, it comes down lower. But it's basically early detection is the key. It's, I think, not everything is a play of the industry.
Okay.
If somebody told me that, yeah, if your creatinine was at this level, if I had a better test to detect it 2 years ahead, and I would be saved 2 years of dialysis because I would get appropriate treatment earlier, I would say, yeah, bring me on whatever test there is. And okay, lower down the scales, and I would be happy to be labeled diabetic at an earlier scale or hypertensive, considering the impact it has subsequently on the development of kidney disease. As far as the research business is concerned, I mean, the Pakistan Society of Nephrology has been playing a very important role, and this year their committee and their chair has put together several task forces, including for advocacy, and research is one of those things. So our job is basically to try and train our nephrologists, trainees, as well as the supervisors in the techniques of high quality clinical research, and subsequently hope that by the end of the year we put together networks within the country which can generate our own data to inform evidence-based policy formulation.
Exactly, and we certainly need it, and the world's actually talking about it as well, and you were very wise with your words, sir, when you actually kind of defended the pharmaceutical companies, that it cannot always be the pharmaceutical companies. I like your approach, and it's good, but imagine that early detection will actually put somebody on medication, and that's something which we want to avoid, rather than somebody having regular doses of their medication. Just because the scale now have come down, it will put a lot of people on medication, eventually helping pharmaceutical companies to sell their medicines.
Fortunately, the early detection is usually associated with early lifestyle changes. Not always it's going to be medication.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Once again, very wise with words. But now moving on to Dr. Zahid Saab over here. So Zahid Saab, now God forbid, when we speak about all of those chronic illnesses, first of all, when do you think that the gentleman or the lady really needs to show up with their symptoms? What can be the early symptoms for people? Obviously, we've spoken about protein in urine and all of these things as well, and the fluid and pathri, God forbid, or the kidney stone. And God forbid, if you think that it's not or it cannot be helped with medication, then when do you think it's the time for kidney transplant?
Yeah, two things. One, I would like to emphasize, because unfortunately many of the kidney diseases they don't have so many symptoms in the earlier part.
Okay.
So that's why initially I said if you are a high risk person, you should check.
यानी घर में किसी को है तो आप check करा लें.
Yeah, if you are diabetic, hypertensive, as sir mentioned, you are diabetic more than 10 years, type 2, there is a chance that kidney might be involved. So a check at the right time is very important, because the symptoms, most of the glomerular diseases, there might not be any symptom, and patient is presenting for the very first time with full blown symptoms, and you found that the kidney is gone.
Right.
And what tests are available to kind of,
Yeah.
go ahead and
Dr.
check it?
Kadri mentioned, I think the most important test which is undervalued is a urine analysis.
Okay.
Right.
It is very cheap. If you are at risk, just do your urine analysis, and if you can just complement it with a ultrasound of the kidneys, I think these two tests will give you ample information from where you can further decide what is the way to move forward. So, these two tests, and obviously RFTs, which is a kidney function test. If you do these three tests, you would come to know if there is something seriously wrong or no.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, please.
The other thing is that you asked about dialysis
Yeah.
and transplant.
Yeah.
Transplant we offer to the patients once we are sure that their kidney is not going to function. There are two ways we offer transplant to our patients. Once we have ascertained that it is a chronic kidney disease, it is an irreversible phenomena. So, they are under our follow up. So, we offer them a preemptive transplant, so that they should not hit the dialysis machine, and we can transplant them before that.
Okay.
The other population is which unfortunately presented late, they are already on dialysis. So, we label them as end stage kidney disease and they are dialysis dependent. So, the best option for them is transplant by all means.
Okay.
And
Right.
unfortunately, in Pakistan, it is not been offered to patients for multiple reasons. The doctors themselves are not well exposed to this. They are not well exposed because many of the hospitals, even in Pindi, Islamabad, they are not doing transplants.
Right.
Okay.
So, those who have been trained there, they have not been exposed to this. So, they do not offer this to the patient. But if you review the literature, the data, sir is a researcher, he will tell you that by all means transplant improves your survival.
Right.
Your 1 year survival, your 5 year survival, your 10 year survival. And diabetics, one thing I would like to add, diabetics, they are not usually being offered transplant saying कि जी वो आपको तो sugar है ये तो transplant हो ही नहीं सकता. Transplant is the best option for diabetics. If you are a diabetic, you have reached end stage kidney disease, the chances that you will survive 5 years is only 30%.
Right.
But if you are diabetic, you get a transplant, you were a dialysis patient and you got a transplant, your survival is 80% 5 year.
Oh, wow.
So, the transplant is a real magic, I think, and we should promote it by all means.
Right.
Wow.
Now, Dr. Mushtaba Qadri Sahab, sir, I wanted to ask you, like, how much of the medical nutrition therapy is effective in the slow progression of the chronic renal disease? And also, I want to ask this question because I feel it's very important. The people who are going through or suffering through kidney diseases, are they prone to other diseases also?
Yeah, so let me again start with the last one, because at my age I remember the last question first. So the last question, what was the last question? I'm sorry.
The people who are suffering through kidney disease are prone to the other diseases also.
Yeah, yes, thank you so much. So yeah, I mean, like unfortunately, because a lot of patients with kidney disease have accelerated atherosclerosis,
Right.
the biggest killer in our population is heart disease and strokes. So these are the ones. So you need to be very careful in terms whether you are diabetic or not. Even if somebody has proteinuric states, a lot of protein in the urine, they have a tendency to develop hyperlipidemia or high cholesterol levels and all. So they have this atherogenic medium which causes stiffening of the vessels of the heart or the brain.
Right.
So they are more susceptible to that. They patients on dialysis, they don't have very good immunity. Patients who are transplanted don't have very good immunity, susceptible to infections of all kinds, unusual infections, opportunistic infections, we say. So yes, I mean, like obviously if you have kidney disease, doesn't come alone.
Right.
Unfortunately, lot of things come with it. Lot of metabolic problems, bone disease, all those things, anemia, it's all part of the system.
Right.
Because the kidneys are master brains, so to speak, peripheral brains in the body.
Understood.
Now, when you're talking about the first question, you were talking
Medical
about
nutritional therapy,
yeah,
is
the
it
nutritional
effective?
thing. So yeah, I mean, like dietary therapy and nutritional therapy is one of the most important strategies to delay progression of chronic kidney disease.
Right. Okay.
That's why it's so important to have an approach where anyone who has chronic kidney disease and they have so-called glomerulonephritis, they are the ones who are salt retainers. So they need to have salt restriction usually. Fluid intake, there's a misconception that you give lots of fluids. That's not appropriate for patients with chronic kidney disease. They cannot get rid of a water load, so about 1.5 liters a day.
Right.
More than that hurts, less than 1 liter a day hurts. They need to have special diets where they restrict their potassium intake, they restrict their phosphorus intake, and the protein intake. If you reduce it by about 20 to 30%, that has a salutary effects in terms of delaying progression of chronic kidney disease. So nutritionists within the team are extremely important to have, and patients always, seek advice from nephrologists or urologists, but they also sometimes need to go specifically to target their food, food preferences
Right.
with the intakes
Wow.
that are recommended.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Dr. K.H. Mujtaba Qadri Saab, consultant nephrologist, Maroof Hospital as well. And thank you so much, Professor Dr. Zahid Nabi Saab, head of nephrology, KRL, for joining us, and that too on such an important day. And for everybody who's out there, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we certainly need to head out towards the short break, but don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we have another fantastic segment for you. But before we go there, please make sure that you look after your kidneys. It's really very important for your well-being. For all of those people who are hypertensive or diabetic, please make sure that you look after yourself in the first place, get yourself tested. And I always recommend this, that at least once a year or twice a year, please make sure that you just get yourself checked up, even if there's nothing wrong. There's no harm in it. With that, we're heading out towards a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Good morning.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You have tuned into World this morning. I happen to be here on Mustafa. Alongside with me is amazing colleague Shahzad Khan, and this is the second segment of this show in which we're going to talk about women entrepreneurships, and we have been joined by an amazing guest inside the studios who names to be Muhammad Asif, and he is a founder of Butterfly Effect Foundation. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much.
How are you, brother?
I'm very good.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
wonderful to have somebody over here inside the studios, and that too right after the International Women's Day, to speak about how women can really be at the forefront of entrepreneurship. So let's talk about the butterfly effect. What is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me. It's great to be here. And I think happy International Women's Day to everybody.
Yeah.
And I think I'd love to pay a tribute to all the lovely women that are doing great work in the world.
Thank you.
The point that that I had was, which was one of the main reasons to set up the Butterfly Effect Foundation, was to understand how can we bring women more into the foray and help drive the change in developing economies such as Pakistan. I happen to be Pakistani, so this was a great place to start for me.
True.
What I did was I've worked out a framework, which is a thought-through strategy that states that in order to bring about the real change, we need more women into work.
Right.
Now that's quite easily said than done. You then need to have a properly thought through framework behind it, i.e. you've got to educate them first, then you've got to empower them, then you've got to give them advanced skills, and then you get to a stage where they're ready for investment.
True.
Because typically what happens is, just because somebody's gone through a degree, they aren't ready for an investment. So you've got to go through process. And in a country like Pakistan, where socio-economic change is hugely important,
exactly,
you could have someone with a great degree, but our social elements will hold them back. So we've got to start to empower them, because I always talk about empowered women empower other women. So that's an important point.
Exactly. So Asif, it's wonderful to listen to all of these amazing words and the jargon you have used, and I believe that it's going to be a source of inspiration for a lot of people. Sure. But let's very quickly understand the way ecosystem in the Butterfly Effect Foundation, and how does it, okay, so you said that we empower them, we educate them, we bring them to that forefront where they have that amazing skill set with them with which they can contribute. Wonderful. How do you do that in the first place?
Yeah. So I think, as I say, the whole idea was to break this foray, because I've often heard women empowerment, and then when I ask people how do you do it, they don't have a strategy. And so we wanted to work that out. So for me, it starts with education, right? Because until you can educate women.
So your foundation educates?
Or the idea of our foundation is to educate, but also provide funding for other institutions that are already doing that
providing
work
education.
To provide, correct, but they lack funding, right? I often find, as an overseas Pakistani, the biggest problem is access to funding for people here, whether that's for investment or whether that's right at the beginning for education. So what we're looking to do is have great organizations that are already doing that work in Pakistan come and talk with us, so that we can assess you and say, well, actually, if you're meeting all the right criteria, we can provide you funding.
Wow.
So that means that these great organizations can continue to
Right.
provide education. We can then work on the next set, which is empowerment,
Yeah.
right? So now this is the point where we study, well, how do you empower someone? I think we've got to understand what empowerment means
Right.
to begin with. What we looked at was sort of various models. So if you look at Middle East, for instance, you've got highly educated women who are sent to Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge and all these amazing schools around the world, and yet they're not empowered quite often. Conversely, if you go to Africa, there's a lack of education there. You may have
True.
empowerment, but there's lack of, so empowerment without education, education without empowerment simply doesn't work.
Useless.
So hence I said, let's get the people that are already doing the great work for education do that, but provide them with funding. Then we look at the next step, which is about empowering them. And that's where I'm talking to lots of universities in Pakistan, and I'm telling them that you shouldn't just be educational institutions. You should be
Vocational training centers as well.
correct. That is key, right? So if you can be an entrepreneurial university,
Right.
that almost looks at doing sandwiched based courses. So what that means is if you're doing a master's degree, you need to have affiliations with various national, international firms that states that will teach you for a semester or two, then you go and do work placement for 3 months or something, and then you come back and finish your course.
Right.
So what's happening now is that you're getting on the job training, which means that when you finish your education, you can actually get real work. And that's
Providing the
whole idea.
opportunity beforehand.
Correct. Yeah.
Exactly. And in addition to that, now, okay, so I'm very sorry, but because we're
Sure.
short on time, so I would want people to understand more about the Butterfly Effect Foundation as well. So now imagine that we have a woman or a lady who's actually educated.
Yeah.
She's empowered. She has all that support system, which is going to let
Fabulous.
her achieve her goals. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, what do we do with that ready product of ours? That okay, now the world is open for you, go ahead. So, or do we guide them that okay, that you probably will settle in this job market? Do we bridge that gap in between the academia and the job market when we have an empowered lady with that support
Yeah.
system and education background?
Awesome. Well, this is exactly what we're looking for. So this the last bits of this is, the first thing is mentorship, which is where we want to actually guide them and steer them through the entire ecosystem here and overseas. And I think the great thing by being overseas is that we can bring all the great disciplines that are done internationally into this country and say, well, actually, here we are, 3-6 months of literal mentorship. And at the end, they're ready to pitch their idea to us. And that's the stage of investment. So
Okay.
pitch your idea.
So it's
Right.
like an incubation center as well.
Absolutely. And actually, we're also doing that with a few universities to set
Wow.
incubation centers there.
Wonderful.
And so yesterday I was at one of them and I was doing this 2-hour mentorship session, and I asked them to pitch their ideas to me. There were, I think, a group of 35 to 40 ladies, and 6 or 7 of those ideas were absolutely incredible.
Wow.
And I think they're investment ready. And so this is exactly what we want. So in fact, this evening I'm meeting a couple of them. They'll be pitching their ideas to me,
Right.
and hopefully one of them will secure an investment.
Inshallah. And one more thing at this point of time, and that is that, because I've been, alhamdulillah, doing this show for the last decade, and I've come across a lot of organizations and foundations who work on the very forefront. It looks like as if they're working for the betterment of the people, but at the back end, you see that they have like a 20% or a 30% or 40% share in that particular business idea,
Right.
just because they got the idea in the first place, and then they were the people who actually invested in it. And there's no harm in it. That's not what I'm saying. But when we speak of Butterfly Effect Foundation, do you think that the Butterfly Effect Foundation is actually looking for partnerships as well when these brilliant ideas pop up for a lady who you've empowered, you've educated?
You're right.
It's your right. I'm not saying that it's not your right. Does it work?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of ways that you could do this. What you have to understand is that if the commercials don't work for the investor,
True.
the investment won't flow.
Obviously.
So you need to look at those two things. The bad thing is where that practice becomes a hawkish or a sharkish practice,
True,
whereby
true.
you say, well, I need to have 50% ownership and so on. So we have one of our part of our constitution is that we will never take more than a 30% stake in the
Right.
business. And that all depends on the valuation, the amount of work that you need to do with them. Some people are just ready, and what they need is the money to expand. But then what they also need is the access to different markets that we can provide.
True.
Whereas there'll be other people who'll have a great idea, but they need a lot of training, a lot of mentorship. So you need to work with them. So I think that's where you'll decide, do we stay at 10, 15, 20? I think that's called valuation matrix. It's actually a concept that I don't think is very well known in Pakistan that would love to introduce and make sure that people understand it. Look, my aim is to try to find a $10 million, $20 million company each year from Pakistan.
Inshallah.
If you can do that successfully
Right.
over the next 10, 15 years, I think not only it will produce great employment opportunities for the local economy, but I think it will just set the great precedence for other people to say, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And that's the reality. You can. I always look at entrepreneurship to say it is the #1 way to solve real world problems. When entrepreneurship goes up, economy just gets fixed by
True.
itself because
Exactly.
employment goes up, the wealth revolves in the economy. So I think that's really the idea.
Right.
Wonderful.
Now, Asif, like how your foundation is actually aiding the young women to mantle the leadership, because we do need leadership qualities when it comes to the women entrepreneurship, starting off with the small setups and businesses.
Right. So this is a great question, by the way. So we set up another foundation called World Women Organization because this is the part where we need to provide them with a great network. So World Women Organization, I'm a co-founder of that. It's now operating from 67 different countries.
Wow.
My aim is to take it throughout the world,
Inshallah.
195 voices all around the world. But immediately, if there was a woman in Pakistan who had this great idea, but she needed access to all of this stuff that you're talking about,
Right.
well, become a member of the World Women Organization. It's free, but suddenly you get access to 67 countries currently, but hopefully more, inshallah, where you have a great support system, a great network. You can ping your ideas and see how they're doing it in Indonesia, how they're doing it in the UK, how they might be doing it in Sweden, all this sort of stuff. So really, that's the aim. That's why I set up the World Women Organization. And if anyone wants to look at it, I'd recommend that they have a look at the butterflyeffect.org.uk for the butterfly, and certainly have a look at the World Women Organization. That is women with an E and organization with a Z.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you, like, the women who are watching this program at the moment, how can they reach out to you? Because I feel that it's a great foundation that actually at the forefront in championing this women entrepreneurship cause.
Right.
Butterfly.co.uk.
Butterfly.org.uk.
Yeah.
It's a registered charity, so the .org.uk and worldwomenorganization.org. I think that's the best way. Go there, have a read of what we're doing so that you can really and truly understand it. And then there's a contact us section, send us an email. We're looking for investment opportunities. We're looking to invest. We have the funds available. What we need is great ideas, great entrepreneurs who are ready to take the risk. They have the courage and they have the confidence to say, I'm going to do this. I want my ultimate message, the common denominator to all of this is, I want all of the women to understand this. The question should not be, who's going to let me?
True.
The question should be, who's going to stop me?
Right.
Wow,
Right.
and that's wonderful.
Wonderful.
And ladies and gentlemen, if Muhammad Asif can do it, obviously you can do it too as well. Thank you very much, Asif, for being a source of inspiration early in the morning. Please make sure that you write to them as well, and that is butterfly.org.uk, if I'm not wrong. Yes, I'm correct over here as well. So for everybody, and then at the same time, other than you pitching ideas, what you can do is that you can actually aid the foundation as well, and for that you'll certainly have to contact on the same email as well. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, look after yourselves. 1, 2, 3. Good morning.
morning.
Have a great day.